What had been promised as a bold reinvention of the most iconic race on the Formula One calendar ended up becoming yet another reminder of the sport's ongoing struggle to innovate where it matters most. The much-hyped introduction of a mandatory two-stop strategy for the Monaco Grand Prix, touted as the fix for years of stagnant racing, ultimately failed to deliver in any meaningful way. The new rule was supposed to force teams into more aggressive tire strategies, spark more overtaking opportunities, and increase pressure on drivers to take risks rather than settle. But in practice, it led to exactly what fans feared, a drawn-out strategic chess match in which no one dared to move their pieces. Once again, the streets of Monte Carlo resembled more a glamorous photo shoot location for yachts and celebrities than a legitimate racing battleground. Despite the regulation change, the top 4 drivers finished in exactly the order dictated by raw pace, as overtaking remained virtually impossible. The forced pit stops became tactically irrelevant due to the circuit's extreme lack of overtaking space. Monaco, once the crown jewel of Formula One, now retains its prestige in name alone. When McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull spend over 70 laps nose-to-tail without a single position change through racing merit, the sport is left grappling with an uncomfortable question. Is Monaco still worth saving? Lando Norris ultimately emerged victorious, claiming a major milestone in his F1 journey and closing the championship gap to his teammate Oscar Piastri to just 3 points. Sandwiched between the two McLarens was Charles Leclerc, who put in a typically composed performance on home soil, but once again walked away with little to show for it in terms of excitement or reward. Max Verstappen, meanwhile, finished 4th despite Red Bull gambling on a bold, ultra-late pit stop, delaying their second stop until the penultimate lap in a desperate attempt to shake things up. The chaos they hoped for never materialized. But this wasn't a case of drivers lacking effort or courage. The modern reality is far more frustrating. These cars are simply too big, too wide, and too fast for the tight, twisty layout of Monaco. Norris, Leclerc, Piastri, and Verstappen found themselves trapped, not by strategy errors or poor form, but by the sheer limitations of the track. Even the most basic attempt at an overtake was an exercise in futility. At this point, it's painfully clear that without a radical overhaul, Monaco will continue to be little more than a championship points parade dressed in historical significance. Former F1 driver and current Sky Sports commentator Martin Brundle summed it up perfectly. "I don't like this rule. I really don't. I don't want to see a grid full of world-class drivers stuck playing a game. This is supposed to be the peak of motorsport, the very definition of excellence, and yet I hate watching so many drivers cruise around at half throttle." That sentiment echoed through the paddock, capturing the growing frustration with what the Monaco Grand Prix has become, a race where genuine excitement is either manufactured artificially or entirely absent. What made it all the more infuriating was how orchestrated the drama felt. The only genuine storyline worth tracking emerged from the midfield, not because of extraordinary skill or on-track heroics, but due to how blatantly teams manipulated the rulebook. Racing Bulls and Williams, in particular, weaponized the new regulations like seasoned tacticians exploiting a legal loophole. Liam Lawson executed his role with methodical discipline, holding up a train of cars with the calm of a veteran, while his teammate Isaac Hadjar used the opportunity to complete both pit stops early, earning a career-best 6th-place finish. Mercedes, meanwhile, found themselves tangled in the mess. George Russell and rookie Kimi Antonelli were caught in a comical traffic jam of strategy gone wrong. At one point, Russell opted to take a drive-through penalty rather than give back a position on track, an embarrassing reflection of how warped the system had become. Red Bull's decision to delay Max Verstappen's second pit stop until the final laps was a clear act of desperation, a last-ditch attempt to create chaos via a safety car or red flag. It didn't work. Verstappen, who usually thrives when given clean air, spent the majority of the race staring at Oscar Piastri's rear wing, with zero realistic opportunities to attack. When he finally boxed, the top 4 simply reset in their original grid order. Charles Leclerc tried to turn up the pressure, but physics, not talent, denied him the tools to mount any real challenge. Even Lewis Hamilton, stranded in an isolated 5th place, spent the afternoon running his own private time trial. Further down the order, the chaos was even more absurd. Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon coordinated their pit strategies in what felt more like a ballet of artificially created gaps and slow sectors than real racing. Antonelli and Russell used the exit of the chicane as a tactical release valve, and when Russell was told to return a position, he flat-out refused, opting for a drive-through penalty instead, the lesser of two evils in his view. It was a race defined by evasive maneuvers and a brutal showcase of how desperation bends the rules. Meanwhile, Fernando Alonso's misery continued. His race ended prematurely due to a mechanical failure, his Aston Martin coughing out smoke as it limped to a stop. Once again, a skilled driver robbed of any chance to prove himself, another casualty of forces beyond his control. Even the race's opening felt flat. Gabriel Bortolito lightly tapped the barriers at Portier, triggering a virtual safety car, VSC. Several drivers, Yuki Tsunoda, Pierre Gasly, and Oliver Behrman, dived into the pits in hopes of gaining an early advantage. It came to nothing. Gasly's overambitious attempt to pass Tsunoda ended in contact and left Alpine in pieces. Tsunoda hobbled on, but the damage was done. The VSC window closed before anyone could capitalize. Despite all the mid-race chaos, the final result remained almost untouched. The podium wasn't determined by daring overtakes or late-race brilliance. It came down to pit stop timing, tire preservation, and careful manipulation of traffic flow. Verstappen's second stop, executed just before the checkered flag, said everything. Red Bull knew there was no position to be gained, but pitted anyway, just in case. There was no racing left. Only damage control. If one driver stood out, it was Lando Norris. Calm, composed, and in total command, he absorbed brief pressure from Leclerc and responded decisively, managing the race with quiet authority. Yet even his win couldn't escape the shadow of Monaco's existential dilemma. Formula One can't keep promoting this race as the crown jewel of the calendar while offering so little in terms of on-track action. The sport must choose, either embrace radical change, smaller cars, circuit modifications, or even a new Monaco layout, or confront the reality that nostalgia alone can no longer justify the stagnation. The mandated two-stop rule was meant to shake things up. Instead, it revealed how deep the problems run. If Monaco is to remain relevant, structural change is the only lifeline. And this race wasn't just another fixture, it carried massive implications for the championship. Norris's win drastically shifted the narrative, cutting into what once looked like an unstoppable start to the season for Piastri. Now, the title fight is alive within McLaren, with Verstappen looming close behind. The points gap tightens, confidence builds, but even that subplot feels underserved by a race that resisted drama at every turn. What stood out most during the pre-race analysis was a recurring stat cited by Ted Kravitz and Bernie Buscombe. In Monaco, you need a 4-second pace advantage to attempt an overtake. That figure might have been tolerable in the past, but with today's oversized F1 cars, it feels absurd. Throughout the race, we saw frontrunners comfortably lapping in the low 1:14s, unable to pass drivers running 5 seconds slower per lap. Not a marginal gap. A chasm. And still, no overtakes, no fights, just formation driving at pedestrian speed. That's not racing. That's a procession with sponsorship banners. The mandatory two-stop rule at the front of the grid might have been a step in the right direction, an attempt to inject some life into the predictable procession that Monaco has become. But in execution, it fell short. Not because the concept itself was flawed, but because teams quickly discovered how to exploit it, manufacturing massive time gaps through synchronized pace management to shield their lead drivers. This raises a pressing question. Is it time for the FIA to consider introducing a minimum lap time rule to prevent this kind of manipulation? As for the circuit itself, meaningful changes feel borderline impossible. One suggestion has been to eliminate the Nouvelle chicane and extend the straight, possibly opening up an overtaking opportunity. Others have proposed shifting the entry to a lower position chicane, hoping it could encourage more action. There's even talk of a reconfigured section before Portier, featuring a potential loopback corner to create space for a pass. But as always, safety concerns and a deep-rooted attachment to tradition block the path forward. This isn't a new issue, but it's never felt this critical. The Monaco Grand Prix remains a spectacle, yes, but no longer a competition. What we witnessed this weekend wasn't racing. It was a procession dressed in the illusion of sport. The rules, the track, the cars, none of them are working in harmony anymore. And until that changes, no amount of nostalgia or heritage can hide the truth. This is not what Formula One is supposed to be. What comes next remains uncertain. But if this weekend was any indication, the next major overhaul needs to come fast, and it must be substantial. Because right now, the only thing more outdated than the circuit itself is the belief that things will improve on their own. What's your take? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you.